Yes. After 6 months in India, using only sign language while training, they know no theories of physics, electronics, mathematics. All the women sitting together on one table learn how to assemble charge controllers and inverters, how to establish a rural electronic workshop in small rooms donated by the community, install solar panels on the roofs, connect them to deep cycle batteries. Depending on their economic status, they have agreed to pay between $5 to $10 a month per solar unit. This is a fundamental breakthrough because nothing should be free. 214 solar grandmothers has of today solar electrified 13,000 houses in 186 villages. The first technically and financially self-sufficient solar electrified villages in the whole continent of Africa, indeed the world. By 2013, by including Liberia, South Africa, Southern Sudan, Zimbabwe, Burundi, Zanzibar, almost all the countries in the continent of Africa will have been covered, saving 1.5 million liters of kerosene from polluting the environment and thousands of tons of wood from being cut, depleting the already fragile forest. There is no question. The barefoot approach is here to stay. What Mahatma Gandhi said comes to mind. First they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they fight you, and then you win. We have covered almost the whole globe because we've been to South America, we've been to Africa, the Middle East, and now we've got 20 women from the Pacific Islands. We only tie up with organizations before we train any grandmother from any part of the world. We tie up with organizations, the Skoll Foundation, the UN Women, private foundations, and of course the government of India, and now we've got a very good partnership with Enel in South America. We had the Dalai Lama calling. He didn't believe that there were women who could be trained, so we've trained 2 Tibetan women, and he's been delighted that these women have actually solar electrified half of Dharamsala. But he also said something that Viren said very clearly when he came to the Barefoot College. He said, now that you have shown the Barefoot College working in practice, let's see if the professors and experts can make it work in theory. That's him.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Vankar, as usual, is very engaging and very informative and very insightful. So he has given us a wonderful story of how in about 40 years, maybe in 40 countries, I think, or maybe more, I don't know. 54 countries is a story that anybody will be proud of. We are all proud of what Barefoot College has achieved. We have 4 minutes before we close because we have to close at 10:25 to start for the Rashtrapati Bhavan, President's House, for presentation of the report. There are 2 suggestions I'm making. One, I'll take 1 minute myself, and then we will discuss the issues on the way to Rashtrapati Bhavan and at the lunchtime. So please sit with us. Our panel members are all willing to host, and they'll all be here at lunchtime. Bankar, you are going to be here at lunchtime, where people will like to ask questions and interact with any one of those. Now, I just want to tell you that the innovation story that colleagues have shared requires several platforms for these innovations to take place. And I will mention about 4 platforms that Honeybee Network has created in the last several years. And I will refer to more things that we have done in the last 5 years so that you know how we are creating platforms for innovation, investment, enterprise on one side to be interacting, meeting, and on the other side, engaging 2 million technology students of our country with the MSME, with the informal sector needs. So one of the platforms I will mention, and you should see when you find time on your mobile or on your laptop, is techpedia.in. Techpedia.in, T-E-C-H-P-E-D-I-A, techpedia.in. It has 100,000 engineering projects done by 350,000 students. And when you go there, the new thing that we have added there is the examples where students have solved problems of MSME and informal sector, grassroots innovations, in 8 months. So there can be no more time-bound problem-solving model of innovations in the world where at the end of the 8 months you have to get an output because the student will not graduate without a report. So what we're thinking about is that India will become a hub, not of low-tech IT outsourcing. It will become a hub in the next decade of high-tech outsourcing, where our students in technology communities will be addressing complex problems in a distributed model of problem solving. So this is one model that I would like you to look at and see how innovations are moving forward. We give Gandhian Young Technological Innovation Award. One of them got GE Award 2 days back at CII, National Innovation Council meeting. A girl from IIT Kanpur, Shanu, had developed a mechanical wheelchair which climbed the stairs. Now this is an award, but the tragedy is that none of the awardees have been approached by any developmental fund, including yours. Not one of them have been approached by any risk fund. That demonstrates the weakness of our system. So-called angel fund and so-called inclusive fund, none of them have hunger to reach the innovators. So that is the major problem that we are facing, and kindly reflect on it. What should we do? What kind of accountability parameter we generate? So the people will ask themselves the question as to how many innovations came on the table, how many were approached by the funds. Second thing we have done is, we call it Ignite function, where children invent, engineers fabricate, companies commercialize. We call it inverted model of innovation. On 10th of November, Dr. Kalam, our former president, will give awards. So a child, for example, saw that rickshawala, manual rickshawala, feels tired when there's a slight climb. So he said, why can't the passenger also co-paddle? You see, empathy. So when passenger will co-paddle with the rickshawala, you don't have to get down. What a great way of solving problems. You are not just rider on the rickshaw, you are a paddler also of the rickshaw. Changes the way we think about life. It changes the way we, and he's a young kid. The youngest kid who's getting award on 10th November is class 2 from Jalgaon, one Pathan, Yusuf Pathan. And he said, why can't a windmill run my fan? So he has invented, or at least imagine a bevel gear. In class 2, he's imagining a bevel gear. How many of us could have done that at that age? So there's a transformation taking place. Ignite platform is the second one. Third, this platform that has come up in the last few years is a platform where the formal and informal science are being fused. So NI worked with last year 189 labs in the country in developing linkage so that the grassroots innovations, people's knowledge get validated and valorized by the formal science and technology institutions, whether of ICMR, CSIR, or private sector. So that's the third platform, where the top labs of our country, the best labs, are engaging with the best minds in the informal sector and trying to generate value-added products and services. And finally, we have created 2 or 3 funds, small fund, very small fund, just $1 million, unlike yours, which may be $100 and $200 million I'm hearing around. Just $1 million, Micro Venture Innovation Fund. You have all heard about microfinance. How many of you have heard about micro venture finance? So in 2003, we created this fund with SIDBI. The idea is that a single signature, under single signature, no guarantees, no obligant, no guarantee. People should be able to get funds to take risk. Last year, we created a fund, Grassroots Technological Innovation Acquisition Fund, to expand the public domain, acquire the private IP rights from the innovators, and make them public domain, create the open source. So I like the idea of open source technology that you mentioned, William, because this is the heart of the matter. Transaction cost for acquiring new ideas must be reduced as much as we can, and this is the time to do that. Finally, I must say that there are some, we have also developed a concept of technology commons, which means that individual to individual copying is not only allowed but encouraged, individual to firm is not. We have filed more than 550 patents. Many firms in US and India file pro bono patents for us. We pay a pittance. We don't actually pay any fees to any of the patent attorney. They all file it for pleasure and joy. So there is a model which has been developed for using IP in a very different way. The new model of IP that India is evolving will not militate, will not punish a fellow farmer learning from your invention, but in fact encourage the fellow community to learn from that. So let me conclude by saying that this session has brought out a very rich range of ideas and innovations which can stimulate our mind to think even more vigorously about the innovations at the bottom of the economic pyramid. Please, I will reinforce, never for once think that there are no pyramids in which poor are at the top. There are many pyramids. We have seen examples. 140,000 families may not have just used that solar light. They may have modified them further. I'm sure in Bunker Rise case, many people have modified those things that you have given them. So user-driven innovation is an essential part of that process. Thank you, all the panelists, and thank you, all of you. Do please engage with our panelists at lunchtime and during the trip to the Rashtrapati Bhavan. Thank you so much.
Just an announcement, all foreign delegates should definitely carry their passports with them. You can't carry your mobile phones or handbags into the venue, so you should leave them here or in your rooms. And there's a bus waiting outside for those of you who don't have transport, and everyone needs to be seated by 11 a.m. sharp. Yeah, there's a 35-seater bus outside, yeah. So people who have transport, please make your own way there. Gate number 2 at the Rashtrapati Bhavan.
Experience of a lifetime, so I'd really like to thank Sam for giving us a real experience. So thank you very much, Sam. And I think the team that also pulled that off needs a little round of applause, because it was just really good job. Yeah. So I'm very excited to kick off from a nice momentum we had from the event this morning. We have a really eminent group of people here from Norway, Germany, Italy, and India. And we're going to be talking about something that is very dear to my heart, is clusters. And I thought I'd sort of start off a little bit with kind of describing a little bit of my perspective about this. Clusters, I think all of you understand what clusters are, but in particular, we're talking about clusters of SMEs as sort of an area that we would like to sort of drive innovation, because typically these SMEs don't have access to R&D, don't have access to necessarily the right talent, capital, markets. But the reality is that SMEs are the primary generators of jobs in our respective countries. SMEs are also the harbingers of innovation in most of our countries. And more importantly, SMEs are really usually started by our youth and the younger generation. And the youth is our future. And as a result, SMEs become extremely important. And then we had heard yesterday about the importance of ecosystems. And if you look at a cluster is, in a sense, a naturally existing ecosystem that has already exists for us to take advantage. And if we can really add and change these ecosystems that already exist, which is represented through a cluster, and really be able to let these clusters become more innovative, we can really have a good foundation to start from. So I think that clusters is a very interesting approach. We're getting a lot of interest in India around clusters. Today at the President's event, you saw one of the clusters, Moradabad, and that's one of the oldest clusters in India. It's about more than 200 years old, and they've just seen phenomenal benefits, so I'll take you through that later. So in this panel, we'll really hear about clusters, what is going on specifically worldwide, hopefully get a deeper look at what all countries have done, and really hopefully share our experiences and learn. But I think I feel personally that clusters really needs to be re-looked at as a new development platform for driving growth in our respective countries. I think there's been a lot of efforts, but I think if you drive it from a perspective of making them more innovative, your whole perspective of these clusters change. So we'll run this panel. We'll do about 8 to 10 minutes per panelist. Interestingly, in this particular panel, I'm chair, but I'm also a panelist. So I will actually do a presentation first, and so I'll act as a panel member, and then I'll go back to acting as the chairman. So I think, Bindeshwari, could you bring up my presentation? I hope you don't mind. So let me talk to you just to kick off while the presentation is is coming up. So I'll talk to you about the Indian experience from the National Innovation Council about the Innovation Clusters Initiative. Next slide. As you know, and we've heard yesterday, that innovation really needs an ecosystem. It needs the right technology, partners, players, talent. It needs financing, it needs industry knowledge, it needs mentors, it needs programs, it needs schemes. And we've all heard that innovation just doesn't happen in a vacuum. It's basically needs an ecosystem to play. Next slide. So as I said in my opening remarks, local clusters, these are actual in the field, in a particular region, in a particular state. Local clusters can act like an innovation ecosystem. A lot of people, there's a lot of articles written about, how can we create the new Silicon Valley in, country X. That's a very hard endeavor. People have tried it. You've seen a little bit of success, but, it's not easy to sort of build out like a Silicon Valley in your particular country. And there may be one or two of those, but it's not necessarily easy. However, if you can build little mini ecosystems of that drive innovation, you have a potential of really making a difference at the local level. And next point. So if you look at a local cluster, it's primarily, we're talking about SMEs as a local cluster. So you can have, Moradabad is a brassware cluster. It's a very localized in a particular city in UP. You can have another cluster that's on automobile components. You can have another cluster that is driving textiles or fashion or garment. But these clusters already have a talent pool aggregated. They also have, most importantly, interests are aligned. And I think this is a very soft but key point, that a cluster has their interests are aligned to drive that particular industry to deliver socioeconomic benefits that all of them receive. Other unique thing about these local clusters is there's very accepted practices. And these have occurred over a long period of time. How do you do business? Who are sort of trusted? Who are we going to do business with? Who are sort of the supply chain partners? Who are the demand chain things? So that's sort of accepted practices. And typically a cluster has known leadership. So if we take this as a given, as a foundation, that this is our kind of foundation of an ecosystem, how do we make these local clusters into innovation ecosystems? So India, through the National Innovation Council, we essentially started an experiment, and we call it a set of pilots. And I'll tell you what we've done, and I wanted to show you a little bit of our results. So next point. So what we did to this local ecosystem is we added the point that let each cluster act as one virtual entity. So let us take maybe these 20,000 units that may exist in a cluster and let it act as one big company. I kind of call it, let's create these virtual Tatas. So when you create a virtual Tata, it looks like a big company, and therefore partners become more interested. They say, oh, there's 1,000 crore revenue in this particular cluster, rather than 500 crore revenue for a particular unit. So you generate this interest in the market, saying this is a big entity, and let's go partner with them because we can get benefit. Second is we established a PPP model in a cluster to really do joint R&D, sort of pool R&D, but we made it a public-private partnership so that they have a stake and they have some skin in the game. Third is we established what we call an innovation networking governance function. And I'll take you a little bit through that. So it's very important for the cluster to essentially create partnerships, have a channel of inbound, outbound activities. And so we created, through these associations, typically an industry association exists in the cluster, we created a little group over there that's very focused on innovation, and we called it a Cluster Innovation Center. But it functions as primarily a networking body. It doesn't have, it's not staffed by a lot of people. It's just a networking hub. And then fourth, we facilitated partnerships. We facilitated R&D partners, science, technologists, financing, mentors, and this virtual innovation networking group, in a sense, created these partnerships. And then last, which is very important, is we marketed the value of innovations. Because there are a lot of skeptics in clusters, especially when the government kind of comes in they're very skeptical. But if we can showcase some real unique value and basically make them believers rather than skeptics, it gives us a new platform to sort of get going. So this is what we did. Next slide. So we created this networking hub, which we called a Cluster Innovation Center. This is not a building. It's basically a small desk with, next point, with basically, we make that as the hub for facilitating all of these partnerships. Next. And we call it CIC, which is really connect, innovate, and channel. So it's a small group of people, typically 1, 2, 3 people, whose only job is to basically network and share and really get these partnerships going, and then facilitate priorities and inbound request, outbound request. So we created in each cluster this Cluster Innovation Center. Next slide. We took 7 clusters across India from a variety of different sectors, from agriculture to furniture to automobile components. Brassware, Moradabad is the one that you heard about today. And we took these and established essentially that model that I described. Next. This represents the 4 corners of India. It's from low tech to high tech and low skill to highly skilled. Next. Very interestingly, these 7 clusters employ 1 million people. So this is not a small experiment. 85,000 companies in these 7 clusters and represents about $4 billion of revenue. So this is a fairly large experiment that we took on. Next. We established through these CICs about 39 partnerships in these 7 pilot clusters, mostly in R&D and mostly with my friend V.K. Gupta at the Council of Scientific and Industry Research, which are science laboratories in India. Next. So these are some of our partners. We had CII, FICCI, CSIR, Ministry of Textiles, MSME. We actually had the Tata Group also involved because I made a very simple pitch to the Tata Group. I said, if Tata wants to be innovative, you can never be innovative if your supply chain is not innovative. You have to invest in your supply chain. So they gave their proprietary innovation training to our clusters. These are management training. Next slide. So here's some results. So I'll take you through. We're on our journey. We haven't completed yet. The first one I'd like to talk about is this an efficient design of a coal furnace. This is exactly what the Moradabad folks today on the video were talking about. You can see on the left-hand side is sort of the typical way that they would heat brass, metal, in sort of a coal furnace. And we created, through one of the CSIR labs called National Metallurgical Laboratory, a new way of designing the coal furnace. And this doesn't require a lot of investment, and I'll take you through some of the numbers. But basically what we established, we reduced coal usage by 25% in a given day. We increased the productivity from 50 kilos a day worth of brassware articles that they made to 75 kilos a day. And most importantly, we decreased the toxic emissions by 80%. And what did this result in? Next. Essentially resulted in doubling the income for a given artisan from $4 a day to $8 a day. This is very, very big. This cluster has 200,000 artisans. And typical, and most interesting in this particular cluster is that there are about 20,000 separate MSME units. But to give you a little idea of how Moradabad is kind of like the wild, wild west of India, there's about close to about 150,000 unregistered companies, which basically don't pay tax. So there's, 20,000 companies that we're aware of, but there's about 150,000 that we're actually not aware of. And if we can double the income of these artisans with basically a return on investment of 7 to 10 days, the whole economic basis of that artisan community completely changes. And this was just very little effort on our side, but very good science and very good technology and very focused on the problem set. Next slide. Next is the furniture cluster. This cluster basically exists in Kerala, again, fairly out in the remote areas, and they really didn't have new designs. So this is where we did design innovation. Like the coal furnace was really around product innovation. Here's where we did design innovation. So it created new kinds of designs for these particular artisans and small SMEs to build with minor tooling enhancements, and we essentially created a whole new sort of product line to sort of expand the domestic market for this cluster. So this is an example by little design innovation, changing existing capabilities, a little bit of training, we created new sort of product lines. Next slide. Next cluster is an agriculture cluster called Krishnagiri in Tamil Nadu. It's basically where all of the Indian mangoes, 60% of Indian mangoes are grown in this particular cluster. Previously, they wanted to export these mangoes, and they'd have to export it only through air transport, which is obviously very expensive. And we had a technology that was existing at CSIR that increased the shelf life of fresh fruit from 7 days to 35 days. And this is 5x. By giving a 5x improvement of the shelf life, we essentially are now opening up the US market, the Japan market, and EU market to Indian mangoes. So I'm actually looking forward to getting Indian mangoes because I go to California a lot. So this was, again, non-chemical based. It's only pre- and post-harvesting protocols. We didn't really change anything or add new fertilizer. So next, so as I said, it opened up this market. Next slide. So these are the innovation results we expect. We're not done with our pilot. We expect about 8 to 10 new product lines, 10 to 12 new process improvements, and 2 new centers on these 7 innovation clusters that we've established. Next. However, we expect 1 or 2 of these pilots won't deliver. And that's the process of innovation. Everything doesn't mean there's success. We are going to have some failures, and we accept that there's going to be some failures. Next. Well, what has this taken us? How much effort did it take? So this is a 9-month pilot. We're in the 7th month. We're going to end December 31st. We had a team of 2 people in the National Innovation Council, and I think, where's Kirti? Yeah, that's my guy in this crime that we're committing. And we spent about 20 to 25K per cluster. We have exemplary efforts from the CSIR scientists and very, very focused business development and program management. This is very key to establish the collaborations. And we do what I call the weekly motivation shots. This is classic Silicon Valley. Basically, it's rah-rah sessions with every cluster to keep them motivated and keep them going because we're on a journey that's unknown, dark, and has lots of challenges. And we basically do a weekly motivation shot in some form or another. We get something exciting to happen. We get Sam every month to kind of, get everyone charged up because this is completely new for all of these clusters. So this is what we did. So I thought I'd just describe that to you, and we'll then get on to the next. So, yeah, thank you very much. So that I'm now off being a panelist. Yeah. So I'll have on my right Dr. Nicola Trevisan from Italy. You can talk. Yes. Yeah.
Okay, right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, everybody. Veneto, my region, is a very beautiful country, very beautiful land, rich in natural beauty, landscape, and cultural heritage. But is also is land of industries. We have in our region more than 3,000 industries with more than 50 million euro of revenue. And many of them already work with India. So there is an important context, industrial context. Also, there is the second university in Europe in terms of created in 1222, where teach famous scientists as Galileo Galilei and Niccolò Copernicus. It's also a land of science with the National Institute of Physics Nuclear, the consortium that work in the fusion, the cold fusion nuclear, and also the CNR, the National Council of Research, with many labs. Also the platform for study of oceanographic, and Free University, Padua, Venice, and Verona. So we started here. This is a navy of 11th century, where decided to create a cluster of nanotechnology in Veneto. Summarize this different experience come from the industry and from university. So this come from the framework realized by the National Government of Research that decided in 2002, 2003 to create some cluster on regional basis, focus on different issues: biotechnology, aerospace, materials, composite, and other sector. And decide to, for the reason before described, to create in Veneto the cluster of nanotechnology. But recently, the national government decided to move from the cluster, the technological cluster based on the regional level, to national cluster. The cluster, that national policy reduce the number and concentrate the sector, as you see on the left of the slide. And nanotechnology as a key enabled technology can work in many of these clusters. So we decide to concentrate our activity in green chemistry, life science, agri-food, intelligent factory, and energy. So something about us. Veneto Nanotech is the point of reference in nanotechnology for the Italian and Veneto region entrepreneurial tissue. The mission is to create an international excellence in research and in technology transfer, promoting nanotechnologies applications, and develop startups in nanotechnology. Some data. Now we have more than 75 researchers, 21 patents, 10 startups, 6 licensing contracts, and more or less 300 new industrial contacts per year in many different sectors. We operate through 3 research labs with different scientific focus, devoted to research activities and technology transfer. The 3 labs are focused in 3 different and complementary areas. One is voted on the engineer surface, on nanomaterial, nanostructure materials. The second is focused to create a sensor and device for many applications. And the last one is would like to accompany the knowledge of nanotechnology also in terms of safety for the human health and for the environment. Now we are here realizing labs, make many things with industries, but moreover, the most important thing is our researchers. This was the challenge at the beginning, to create specific competences to able to develop the dialogue between industry and academia, using the knowledge to spread to the industrial market and support them in their competitivity. The lesson that we learned in this year is the importance of researchers' mobility towards industries and spillover. This means that for us it's important to host and to training the researchers and to support them to looking for enterprises where they spend their next activities. And this strengthens the relationship between our labs, the university labs, with the industries. The second, the researchers must be the best marketing resources. From our point of view, the same researcher must be the account manager related to the relation with the industry. This means that the negotiation also and the discussion with industry are managed directly by the senior researchers that work in our labs. From research to the market, the time is always longer than expected. Usually, our plan require some revision related to the more time required to go to the market. And then this is strictly jointly with the business model that we have. The research activity without products is not able to gain money. For us, it's important to reach the economic sustainability, and this is possible just not through the research activity with industry, but also to realize some products and to make a licensing contract with industries. So in the last country, in the past, in the last centuries, in my country, there were a lot of artists from painting and sculpture. We would like to make something like that, to realize some interesting thing that could be helpful for our industries to change their mind, to change their process, to change their products in the new class of industries, able to stay in the market with more competence. Thank you for your attention.
This is quite interesting to set up national technological clusters and have the researchers as account managers. I think that's a great idea. So I'll now have my next panelist, Ms. Rekha Gupta.
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon. My name is Rekha Gupta, and I work with Innovation Norway. Innovation Norway is a government-owned body that supports private and socio-economic profitable industrial development across the country, triggering commercial opportunities of the district and regions, thus contributing to the innovation, internationalization, and promotion. The strategy is to work on 3 high-priority areas, namely the SME growth, entrepreneurship, and innovation milieu. And innovation milieu is further enhanced with programs and schemes that promote network-based innovation processes in clusters, business networks, and other forms of partnerships between businesses, R&D institutions, and public sector. Innovation Norway launched its first cluster initiative in the year 2002, named as the ARENA program. And in 2006, another cluster project was launched, known as the NCE, or the National Center of Expertise. Both the programs are national level programs supporting regional clusters, while the NCE targets dynamic or growth-oriented clusters, also the world-class clusters. The ARENA program promotes cluster development in the broader range of regional partnerships. Both programs are based on annual calls for proposals and an open competition between the cluster initiatives. The ARENA program so far has 22 cluster projects, while the NCE has 12 cluster projects. The philosophy behind the creation of these cluster initiatives has been to enhance stronger interaction and cooperation between the businesses, leading to increased innovation capabilities, and also providing better access to R&D and educational facilities. It's also to strengthen international focus, giving a possibility to expand the clusters, attracting customers, investors, expertise through improved competitiveness. These cluster initiatives are jointly owned by 3 national innovation agencies, the first one being SIVA, also known as the Industrial Development Corporation, and its primary role is to facilitate infrastructure and develop networks to support companies in an early stage of development. The second one being the Research Council of Norway, whose programs help stimulate regional enterprises to make use of research to gain a competitive edge in developing new products and new markets. And thirdly, Innovation Norway, which particularly assists with financing new business ideas, and it also receives an annual allocation from the government of Norway, thus furthering the government's initiatives to foster business innovations in remote areas. So it's a model that links policies along with roles and resources. Innovation Norway supports these clusters through a suite of services that covers most requirements through the innovation processes, right from the clarification of ideas to development, introduction to the market, and subsequent growth of these companies. The first one being the financing services, which comprises of all financial instruments that contribute towards triggering and carrying out of the projects. Networking services that comprises of assistance to initiate and implement development processes and projects in agreement-based groups of parties. The advisory services comprises of dialogue with individual operations, networks, or clusters concerning strategic options and decisions aimed at improving competitive abilities. The competence services comprises of standardized services to groups of trade and industry actors on upgrading strategically important knowledge for the organizations. And lastly, the promotional services that takes measures to make Norway and Norwegian trade and industry visible not only in Norway, but also abroad. Just to give you a couple of examples on how these cluster initiatives are actually working on ground in Norway, the first one being NCE Maritime, which has also evolved as a global knowledge hub for the maritime sector worldwide. It comprises of 14 design companies, 17 shipyards, 15 ship owner companies, 166 equipment suppliers, and contributes to 40% of the world's modern fleet, thus making it as a one world-class maritime sector cluster. Located in the west coast of Norway, it comprises of over 200 leading maritime companies, along with other training, research, and finance institutions. It's the center for Norway's maritime expertise, as it has over 75% of the world's large, high-tech offshore vessels, which are designed there. And 40% of the world's most advanced offshore fleet is controlled by the region's ship owners. It has a global presence with global attraction, while most of the companies of the cluster are homebred, but there are an increasing number of major international players such as Rolls-Royce Marine or STX or Bourbon that are also seeking a place in this cluster. This cluster is a success because it's a winning mix of high pace of innovation, prototype orientation, competition, informal communication, cooperation, and unique know-how within the field of advanced marine operations for the global offshore industry. The second example is NCE Node, also known as the Norwegian Offshore and Drilling Engineering. Located in the southern part of Norway, it comprises of over 50 companies within the oil and gas industry. And the services offered by these companies ranges from complete platform solutions to high technology equipment for use on platforms and ships. And also for its successful cluster collaboration, it has received a gold certificate in the European Cluster Conference in Vienna early this year. Therefore, seen from a Norwegian perspective, cluster initiatives have an extremely important role in the regional and national innovation strategies, thus giving us strong demand for cluster support instruments, especially funding and other additional services. There's a growing awareness in the business community to form partnerships and a growing willingness to invest in these cluster development. And Innovation Norway, being the main operator or the main promoter of these cluster initiatives, believes that evaluations of these cluster programs and projects are extremely positive and are therefore always welcome. With this, I thank you all for your kind attention and wish you a great day ahead. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Rekha. So I'll have our next panelist, Ms. Anani Iyer from Germany, speak.
Dr. Petroda, Mr. Mitra, ladies and gentlemen, a very good afternoon. I head the Fraunhofer in India. It's the world's largest applied research organization, very well known for the MP3 invention, white LED, microcameras, etc. I'd like to take you through our innovation and cluster initiatives. The fundamental difference being that while many cluster initiatives around the globe are fundamentally driven by the government, the Fraunhofer drives innovation clusters in Germany, has its own model, and works extremely closely with the industry in implementing these. Just a very quick profile about the Fraunhofer. We are a not-for-profit organization that primarily does applied research, which means that at the end of the day, the research that we bring out has to be brought out into commercialization. So in that sense, we are very different from the Max Planck or the other institutions that look at fundamental research. So our customers are service industry, service sector, and public administration in that order. We draw our inspiration from Mr. Josef von Fraunhofer, who was a researcher, inventor, and entrepreneur rolled into one. Like I said, the MP3 music format, white LEDs, and high-resolution thermal cameras are our inventions. The most interesting thing about the Fraunhofer is that it's the largest organization for applied research in Europe, with more than 80 research institutions that cover the length and breadth of the industry, because our focus is on application area rather than an industry sector. We have 21,000 employees, out of which 70% are doctorates and postdocs. And we have an annual research volume of 1.8 billion euros. 2/3 of this are generated by projects done by us, and only 1/3 is supported by the government as a basic funding. We have a very international footprint. We are present in Europe, US, Asia, Middle East, of course, India as well. Some amazing facts about Fraunhofer. We talked about some of our inventions, but I think the USP comes from the fact that most of our institutes not only research and provide proof of concept, but we actually close the loop. So we take research out of the universities and bring it into the cultural arena. They have equipment, our institutes have equipments and laboratory space, which is almost as big as a manufacturing company. It is 2 to 3 years ahead in terms of state of art. We do more than 6,500 projects a year, largely working with the small and medium industry, not just the large ones. For every working day at the Fraunhofer, 2 patents are filed. That's some number crunching for you. And the most interesting fact, Professor Bullinger, who also talked yesterday, being a head of a research organization and being voted as the manager of the year is quite something, because normally in Germany, the manager of the year is voted from the industry. So this underlines the kind of acceptance that the industry has for Fraunhofer. This is the footprint in Germany. We are almost present everywhere in Germany with 80 research institutions. It's a vital link between academia and industry. I won't go very deep into this because my president will be speaking later in the next session. But what I wanted to say here was, when you talk about clusters, it's extremely important that the link between academia, research, and industry is seamless. Because at the end of the day, you want to bring out research at the fastest pace and in the most efficient manner. So one of the very interesting things about this ecosystem is that the head of a Fraunhofer Institute is also a 50% professor of that applied area in the university, thereby being able to access research as well as students, docs and postdocs from the universities, and having a very, very strong association with the industry. These are the innovation clusters in Germany. There are nearly 20 innovation clusters on various subjects, basically trying to leapfrog technology in these areas. And the fundamental objective of this is to enhance the close cooperation between governments of the various states where these clusters are present, the university, industry, and Fraunhofer. The way they function is that you have, just like one of my speakers earlier said, and also like Mr. Mitra said, you have a small unit coordinating this entire cluster, and in all these cases, it's the Fraunhofer which does that. You accelerate innovation by creating regional focuses, regional strengths, and regional applications that reinforce the strengths of that region, and creating beacons of research, giving them high visibility, and ensuring that that research area becomes an engine of growth and innovation for that area. The innovation clusters of Fraunhofer basically broadcast the engagement of Fraunhofer in these areas identified. It's the first, probably the first research organization with its own model for development of clusters and coordination and implementing of these. It has a long-term relationship, a partnership with the region between industry and universities, so it's not something that has been developed merely because someone feels that this is an area that needs to be enhanced, but because there is a fundamental understanding of what's happening in that region, and therefore you take it forward. These are project clusters. As opposed to many of the clusters that we know, they are not born out of just networking initiatives, but because we feel that, like a project which has a start and an end date, you look at a cooperation that begins with a particular motivation, and at the end, in the middle, there are very strong monitoring mechanisms, and at the end of a particular project period, there is also a very clear understanding of what have we delivered. And I think in that sense, I'm so much in line with what Mr. Mitra talked today about having a certain period in which you demonstrate the results of this cluster. The very fundamental thing that we have also done is to include the states, or the lender as they are called, in the appraisal process, because they are equal stakeholders. Even though they may not have initiated this cluster, they do fund to a certain extent, and I will in a minute go into the funding pattern. The funding is a contribution from the industry, state, and the Fraunhofer. The Fraunhofer actually invests money into it. The distribution is on an agreed framework, which is called PACT. 50% comes from the industry, because at the end of the day, the industry is the prime beneficiary of this entire cluster. 25% comes from the state or the government, the local government, and 25% from Fraunhofer. If there are more than 2 Fraunhofer institutes that take part, it could go up to a maximum of 3 million euros, and if it's less, it's 2 million. But the most important part in all the funding is the evaluation that is tied in with the funding. These are the innovation clusters and the distribution. As you can see, production forms a very, very strong. Materials and production are the strongest. You have 34% of the clusters that look at materials. You have 23% that look at production, and 17% at ICT. 18% on light and surfaces, and microelectronics is about 8% of these clusters. And these are the industry partners. Now, this is just an understanding of how many industry partners are participating in these various clusters. You will see that, again, adaptronics, which is a very, very new area where you use sensors to understand the material benefits and characteristics of a particular, whether it's steel or wood or whatever. Now, that, which is at least 5 years away from commercialization, that has the maximum industry participation. So this is very interesting to see that many people talk about factors that industry is only interested when the research is ready to go to market, but we probably beg to differ, because you can see that in this case, industry is most interested in a research that is probably 5 years away from commercialization. The Fraunhofer innovation clusters are actually examples of success. There may be a couple which are not so successful. Again, I'm very much in line with Mr. Mitra on that. But the one that we'd like to talk about are the examples of success. And there you can see the digital commercial vehicle technology that we established. There you have the John Deere Research Center. You have the electronic ID card system, where we are also working with the UIDAI in India. We have the nano for production in Dresden. We have the optical technologies, which is one of the most successful in Jena, coming out of the eastern part of Germany. We have the innovation cluster for future security and multifunctional materials and technologies. Again, composites, which is today also a very much demanded technology in India. And finally, the digital production, which I think my president will also talk about. Before I close my presentation, I would like to leave a word with what we are doing in India. We have just opened our representative office in India day before yesterday. We've been present in India for the last 3.5 years. We have an annual turnover of about 2 million euros in India, working largely in the field of production technologies, whether it's machine tools, aerospace, automotive, but also in new renewable energies, in new materials. And day before yesterday, we launched the Open Innovation Center for Healthcare Services, where we are partnering with private industries such as Philip and several hospitals and research organizations such as Apollo and Manipal, basically looking at an open innovation where multiple stakeholders come together to improve the delivery of health services, thereby in line with this inclusive innovation that you all are talking about today. Thank you very much, and I'll be happy to take questions.
Thank you, Anandi. I'll have VK Gupta from CSIR.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. See, this is also one of the photographs of Muradabad, where one of the laboratory has developed a lacquer so that the Muradabad brass can shine a little more. In fact, Mr. Samir Mitra covered the concepts and the outcome of this cluster initiative. My focus would be on the implementation. In fact, yesterday somebody said the great ideas and grand designs would only become useful when they get implemented. And secondly, focus would be on the engagement of science with industry. In fact, that's an area which we need to work more. In particular, CSR laboratories with MSME industry clusters. And what did we learn and why we value this initiative enormously? See, the MSME is a very significant sector which contribute 8.5%. But the real numbers are in 26 million MSME when we say 24 million MSMEs, out of that 24 are micro enterprises who employ less than 4 people. So the innovation has a very large role to play, which we have come to know, and there is large more to do. But thanks to Mr. Sam Pitroda and our Director General Dr. Samir Brahmachari, last year this partnership between NINC and CSR happened. And what we have earned from that partnership at our end and what clusters have earned, that's what I wish to share. See, before I begin this slide, let me also share small facts about CSIR, Council of Scientific and Industrial Research. It's a 70-year-old organization. It's the largest public funding R&D establishment in the country. In fact, our patent portfolio is also quite reasonable. We have 4,500 patents in force today. Out of that, 2,700 are international. More than 3,000 applications are pending. So we have been doing reasonably well in our context. In fact, 9% of our patents we are able to license. We have 37 laboratories in the various diverse fields all across the country. Still, why in 1 year we are finding this initiative can yield much more to nation and also much more to CSIR, making it far more relevant. That is what is the lesson we have learned. See, these 9 laboratories of ours have worked for around a year in these 6 pilot clusters. Some outcome have been shared by Samir. Let me also share few little more. The lacquer I showed you. Then one of our laboratories doing the cyanide-free electroplating process, so that the material used in the Moradabad artificate facts is lighter and cheaper. Then we are also trying to do some machine for agarbatti or incense sticks making, creating some alternates. And more than these issues, these are the few areas where our scientists are focused. That either you minimize waste or utilize waste. You must reduce the input material cost, make energy efficient, create new product and processes. See, essentially what we learned from this experience, this has been a great learning exercise, thanks to NINC. Even our former Director General many times would say a word, Dr. Mashelkar, he was the speaker yesterday, that MLM, more from less for more. In fact, the cluster is a singular example where large number of enterprises, 200,000, you find out a common area, no rocket science, little efforts, but not that what you know. Basically, you work for what cluster says that this is what I need. And when then you implement, the outcomes are so significant. Second lesson which we learned, our scientists learned, that developing technology in a laboratory and implementing in real life are two different things. The mango example, we thought that we have a technology, we have done it very well, but when we were trying to utilize it, then we find the real life problem at the port. There are some other issues which you need to address. In fact, day before yesterday, I got a mail from one of our director. Now they are thinking of setting up of a innovation outreach center in the cluster at Krishnagiri. Then another thing which we now wish to adopt is a discipline that you must measure what you want to do. And measure constantly so as to tell yourself that this is what you have been able to do. Tell others that this is what has been achieved. And finally, these measures of outcome also help in getting the budget line from the government. In fact, in this cluster, now we are planning to implement crowdsourcing as a very important component, where we would try to engage engineering students. Second year students would be identifying the problems. Fourth year engineering students would try to solve. And then we will also linking an incentive mechanism through a budget line that these students can be adequately compensated.